Hello BookTube. Today I'm going to be doing the It's All Relative tag. This tag was created by A.J. Dunn, Reads and Writes, and I'll leave a link to the original video down below. Prompt number 1. Mamma Mia. Wonderful song by ABBA. Recommend a book with a mother character that is pivotal to the story. For this prompt, I'm going to go with Race the Sands by Sarah Beth Durst, in which the mother, Tamara, is the main protagonist. She is a Keyhawk racer and trainer. Basically, Keyhawks are these chimeric monsters that are the reincarnations of the worst of the worst. And Keyhawk racing is the major pastime for this fantasy world that she inhabits. To save her daughter from being forced to live at her magic school, or essentially her magic school, Tamara has to win a major race. And in order to do this, she has to find a special Keyhawk, which is which turns out to be a bit more than your average Keyhawk and reveals a lot about the world, the magic systems of the world, and raises all sorts of political ruckus that eventually sees her rise in her sort of life. Definitely, I recommend it. 2. Papa Don't Preach. Never heard this song before. A book with a father character you like or despise. Sticking with more contemporary fantasy releases, I'm going to go with Golden Gabe from Kings of the Wild by Nicholas Eames. So Kings of the Wild is a world in which everything you can imagine about fantasy is there. And there are roving bands of mercenaries who specialize in tackling monsters. And these mercenary bands are very reminiscent of rock bands from the 60s and 70s and 80s. And the culture around these mercenary bands are, again, very similar to and analogous to rock music fandom. So Golden Gabe was the leader, the frontman of a very famous mercenary band called Saga. They broke up decades before the start of the story, and his daughter, who goes by Bloody Rose, has herself decided to join a mercenary band and gone off to a distant land to fight a horde of monsters. In order to rescue his daughter, Golden Gabe gets the band back together and launches a rescue operation to go get her. And he is such an amazing character, and like his willingness to do whatever it takes to rescue his daughter is just definitely a father figure I like. Prompt number 3. Brothers and Sisters. A book with an interesting sibling relationship. For this one, I'm going with the Iliad. Most of the Olympians are siblings. Either the senior generation, Zeus, Hera, Poseidon, Demeter, Hestia, and Hades, or even though Hestia and Hades don't technically count as Olympians, and then the younger generation of Ares and Hephaestus and Athena, Apollo, Artemis, Hermes, and eventually Dionysus. And the relationships between them are quite interesting, I think. And really, the presence of the gods really makes the Iliad an amazing poem. Much more than if it were just focused on the war in Troy. Prompt number 4. It's been 84 years. A book you like that is multi-generational or chronicles a character's whole life. Now, this prompt gave me some problems because there's one story or one book that really jumped out at me, but I didn't particularly care for it. So I've been sort of wrecking my brain to figure out what book really would fit here. And while it doesn't necessarily chronicle an entire character's life, I mean, the entirety of the overall series does. This specific book that I'm going to mention here only chronicles roughly about a few years of the main character's life, and that is The Legend of the Condor Heroes by Jin Yong, which chronicles the first 20 some odd years of the life of Guo Jing, a young man who will eventually become one of the premier martial artists of the Wulin and so it's like the fading years of the Song Dynasty, like the collapse of the Jin Dynasty and the fading years of the Song Dynasty before the Yuan Dynasty comes into power. And it is an amazing long novel. It's broken up into 4 volumes, and then of course the second volume in the series, the second novel in the series, Romance of the Condor Heroes, kind of continues on his story, although shifts the focus to another character, and actually I think goes more deeply, a longer stretch of time into that character's life. So I'm going to go with Legend of the Condor Heroes here. Prompt number 5, You Complete Me. A book with an interesting marriage as a central element to the story. For this prompt, I'm going to concur with Steve Donahue and go with A Dune by Frank Herbert, in which the relationship between Duke Leto and Lady Jessica is a central feature of the story and is very much an interesting take on marriage. Not quite a marriage. I mean, it's not an official marriage. She's not his wife. She's his concubine. I mean, for all intents and purposes, they're married. But Duke Leto, in order to have, I guess, give him some wriggle room regarding other houses in this sort of far future galactic empire that he lives in, basically has not married her, so that he can initiate a more formal marriage alliance with other great houses, which of course he never actually does. So it's this sort of ambiguous, but not quite ambiguous thing that is quite interesting. Prompt number 6. Picture It Sicily. Not entirely sure where this comes from, but a book with an interesting older character, i.e. a grandparent, great-grandparent, etc. For this one, I'm going to go with The Lord of the Rings, which has Gandalf, who, while isn't anybody's grandparent, he is just a wonderful sort of figure that sort of matches that description. That he's this cool old guy who's kind of working behind the scenes and in front of the scenes to stop Sauron from taking over the world. Prompt number 7. Friends with Benefits. Now, I have a few quibbles with this prompt because the prompt question is, or the prompt is, a book with a found family or friends as family element. Now that's not quite what Friends with Benefits is. Friends with Benefits is where two friends, when they are not in romantic relationships with other people, will themselves occasionally have sex without a romantic attachment. It's physical, it's sexual, it's just not romantic. But sticking with the spirit of the prompt, I'm going to go with Fairy Tale by Hiro Mashima. Fairy Tale is a shonen manga. It's my favorite shonen manga. And it is about the Fairy Tale Guild, which is a guild that very much acts like a family, with Makarov, the guild master, as everybody's father. The older members of the guild, however little there are of them, as being older brothers and sisters, largely because they're quite immature. And then the younger guild members, which make up the bulk of the guild, as really being siblings. And that is, I think, especially driven home with a lot of the relationships between Natsu Dragnil, Grey Fullbuster, and Erza Scarlet, and eventually envelops Lucy as well, and that this guild and the teams that form within it are just such tight, found family type of bonds. Prompt number 8. I think we're alone now. A book with a character who was lost, left behind, or abandoned. Can also be a story with an orphaned or adopted character. For this one, I'm going to go with Naruto by Masashi Kishimoto. Naruto is, again, a manga series. This is one of the big three, published by Weekly Shonen Jump. And it is the story of Uzumaki Naruto, or Naruto Uzumaki, depending how exactly you pronounce it, or say. Naruto is an abandoned child. When he was a baby, shortly after he was born, a monstrous, demonic, nine-tailed fox attacked his village of Konoha. And in order to stop the fox's rampage, the Hokage at the time sealed the Nine Tails into Naruto. This event not only took away Naruto's parents, it also left him a pariah in the village, because the villagers cannot get over the fox's attack, and they see Naruto as the human incarnation of the fox, even though he is more the fox's jailer. And this recognition has left the adults in the village to ostracize him. That they try to have as little to do with him as possible. And their children, for the most part, follow their parents' lead. There is some wiggle room in exactly how isolated Naruto was. There are times when it looks like he never had any friends growing up, and then there are times when some of his he did have some friends. So, but I think Naruto definitely fits this prompt to a T. And finally, prompt number 9, Fur Baby. A book where a pet or animal is a part of the family and or plays an important role in the book. So I think in this case, I'm going to refer back to a previous answer and go with a Fairy Tale by Hiro Mishima. One of the lead characters in Fairy Tale, and also in the Mishima's current work, Eden Zero, is the character of Happy. Happy is an exceed. They are anthropomorphic cats who have the power of flight. And Happy is really a wonderful character. So I'll go with Happy here. So that was the It's All Relative tag. If you would like to do this tag, consider yourselves tagged, and I will see you later this evening with a weekly read. So until then, BookTube, thank you, have a great afternoon, and stay safe.